We can't all work in tech. Somebody's got to play football. Somebody's got to talk about it. I want people, like, if you see me driving in a fancy sports car at some point, I'm not going through a midlife. Yeah, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. I'm going through an all my life crisis. This is what I've wanted to do my entire life. So forgive me that if you see that one day. September 8th, 1992. We're away to West Brom, and the manager calls in the starting lineup, and I'm in it. That's the first I know that they even considered me. We lost the game 3-0, I think it was. From the moment he said my name to the end of the game was a total blur. In talking to people now about getting involved in sports media, I'd say start a podcast or write an article on your local team. The only person watching your podcast might be your mother. That's fine. So I go in Dwight's room. Dwight at 6 in the morning is doing 600 push-ups, 600 sit-ups. And he does this. I sit there and watch this man do this in amazement. And then he says to me, man, I'm feeling hungover from last night. I was like, you crazy? I just watch you do 600 push-ups and 600 sit-ups for no reason. And you telling me you hungover? That was my first kind of insight into Dwight. When you recognize how little difference there is between players at top clubs, players at middle and even bottom level clubs, and the big differentiator is how you manage that downtime, what you do with it. When you recognize that, I think that changes a lot of your perspective. Your true dream is to play at the highest level, and the first thing you think about after a game or after training is, where are we going out later? Now, don't get me wrong, players have a good time, players enjoy it. We have a mindset in the Caribbean, and I think a lot of it is born out of our colonial past, where we feel that being from a small country, you can only go on to accomplish so much. That your ceiling is so much lower than everybody else's, and we live out that reality. When the truth is, I think the diversity of our experiences better equips us for a wider world.
My guest today is the world-famous Shaka Hislop, aka the Shot Stopper. He's a proud Trimbagonian, world-class goalkeeper, and now a global ESPN senior football analyst. He has played in 400 games over his 15-year world-class career, and he's played for teams such as Newcastle United, West Ham, Reading, and Portsmouth. Shaka represented Trinidad and Tobago in its first World Cup appearance and has been inducted into the country's Sports Hall of Fame. He graduated with honors from Howard University in mechanical engineering and is the honorary president of Show Races of the Red Card organization. Shaka, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Mark. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, so I'm real nervous today because I know you're the ultimate interviewer, so I feel honored to go through this process with you. And I wanted to start off with, what does the game of football mean to you?
Oh man, it means a lot in a number of different contexts. First of all, I'll take you through the breadth, I guess, of my experience in playing the game as a young man. It's where I found my confidence. It's where I nurtured friendships. It's where I got to challenge myself. As I grew older, football is what put me through college. Without it, I would not have graduated university. And then I wouldn't have been able to go to university. And then later on in life, it became certainly my profession, where I kind of lived out some of my boyhood dreams. But it also served as a platform for a lot of the things that I was able to be a part of later in life. You mentioned in the introduction, honorary president and one of the co-founders of Show Races and the Red Card. It's been the foundation for what is now my career, and with ESPN as a senior soccer analyst. And it's given me it's also provided life lessons in a number of ways, that I continue to I guess better recognize now in my older life, especially as I have kids, and I'm trying to share my own kind of living experiences and with them.
How does it feel at your level to have gone through this very successful professional athletic career? Because oftentimes this is stuff you see in movies, especially
Yeah.
someone comes from a small island, they make it big, and now you're on a global scale. What does that feel like to sort of maybe wake up as Shaka every day?
Well, waking up on Shaka ain't all it cracked up to be. Let me put it that way. But truth be told, sometimes I'm always an advocate for taking pause and taking stock of some of these things that you've accomplished or been through, um and the directions that you're heading and in my life, that's no different. I look back on a career that, as you say, many can only dream of. Certainly I grew up with never thinking that it would ever become a reality. And I'm proud. I'm proud of what um a little black kid from a small corner of Trinidad and Tobago has been able to do. And I hope I can be an example to many others exactly like me. At the same time, when I get a little too full of myself, when I pause a little too long and maybe pat myself on the back a little too hard, my kids are there to bring me back down to earth. Kids have a way of putting things in perspective. They've only known me as one person. They've not known me as that little kid growing up in Trinidad and Tobago. They've only known me as a footballer, and they are less impressed with it than I tend to be at times.
Yes. Um, One of the reasons I do this show is to highlight the caliber of talent that comes out of the Caribbean. This is
Mm,
across tech, this is sports,
yeah.
there is something that happens to us by growing up in a multicultural environment that I think enables us to perform very differently on the world stage. Uh, what part did your Caribbean heritage play in your success? As if you could reflect back on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I think it's a double-edged sword in so many ways. Um, uh, in that, let me say, I've got 5 kids. My wife and we've got 5 kids. Our youngest three all played soccer/football. Um, And I just kind of recognize some of their own mindsets and contrast that with mine at a similar age. Growing up in Trinidad and Tobago, I'd always represented the national team. I first played national football at 10 years old for a national under-12 team under Bertel St. Clair for what it's worth. And I'd represented all the junior national teams coming up. So I'd always felt like I was one of the best. I never doubted that. Um, and it was clear for everyone, certainly everyone in my circles, that I was one of the best in the country. So I never doubted my abilities in that regard. Um, that being said, I think we have a mindset in the Caribbean, and I think a lot of it is born out of our colonial past, where we feel that being from a small country, you can only go on to accomplish so much. Um, that your ceiling is so much lower than everybody else's, and we live out that reality. Um, when the truth is, I think the diversity of our experiences um, better equips us for a wider world and the direction of the wider world. Um, we're talking, you talking technology, um, but one of the big, and you've got to excuse me here, Mark. I'm no tech guy, as my kids will attest. But one of the big challenges with tech, for instance, now let's just facial recognition comes to mind, and how it does not, how it plays a dissimilar role depending on whether you're white or you're black, and how it misidentifies you. And and in a broader context, one of the big issues in tech is around that diversity. Whereas in Trinidad and Tobago, that's a part of who we are. We don't,
Mhm.
I never questioned the Muslim faith or their holidays, or the Baptist faith or their holidays, or the Hindu faith and their holidays. I never questioned or had to contrast it. I grew up as Roman Catholic, but I never had to question or or compare it, because the guy sitting next to me in class was Muslim. The one right in front of me was a Hindu. The guy to the left of me may have been Jewish, and that was just who we were. That was our normal. And now all of a sudden I'm living in the West, and between my professional career in England and now living in the US, and some of these things that are just are normal are topics for debate, are topics that people are challenged with. So I think in so many ways, being from the Caribbean, being from a place that's as diverse and accepting as the Caribbean, better equips us for the bigger and broader challenges that the world is currently grappling with.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that when you sort of enter a room as a Caribbean person, you're able to kind of be a bridge across different, I don't want to say races, but different groups of people? Do you find yourself being able to homogenize and kind of bring people together?
Yeah, and I'll say, while I say that, it's not. I don't do that intentionally. That's
Sure,
just
sure.
who I
Yeah.
am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I walk into a room, and I can um I can have conversations with people in any sphere, and as much as I used religion as an example a moment ago, it could be anything. It could be around what cars we something as trivial and materialistic as what cars are we driving, or what causes are we involved in, whatever it is. I think kind of again just kind of giving the breadth of both my upbringing and my own adult and professional experiences. I'm comfortable talking about just about anything. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also in life, and I think this is I think this is a good trait to have. I'm also very comfortable saying when I don't know something that I have no idea. Um, and listening. I'm not that ego driven that I feel that I have to have an opinion or have to have some kind of insights on everything. There's a lot that I do not know, and I quite willingly say when when that arises.
Yes, most certainly. So I was, we were talking about this ceiling that's sort of put
Yeah.
on us,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of hidden on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I work for Nvidia, which is number one machine learning company in the world. I'm blessed. Out of I think 30 something thousand employees, there are less than 20 of us that are from the Caribbean. So as you
Mm-hmm.
think about representation in AI, like there's less than 20 of us that represent folks, let's say at the top
Yeah.
machine learning AI company in the world, right? So I take um, you saying that statement about what is possible coming from a small place. I take that very seriously in terms of having to
Mm-hmm.
rewire my own brain as to
Mm-hmm.
how far I think I can go. And it's folks like yourself who end up showing us on a on an individual level what is possible for us as a people. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to sort of highlight that. What do you think is now possible for the next generation of athletes? What, yeah, what's their new possible?
Um, for next generation specifically of athletes, and I think that's a big challenge, and I say that because while while being from Trinidad and growing up or Trinidad and Tobago, and growing up always feeling like I was good enough, um and and I went on to kind of live the professional life that I did. I also recognize how much of a trap that can be. That um, any kid kind of growing up coming through the national ranks as I did, and I've seen this, could kind of feel like they've made it and that they're good enough, and it's a pretty easy bridge to make, and it's not to be the best or among the best of something. It takes not just some talent. I don't think I was an incredibly talented athlete, but I was prepared to work hard. I was prepared to do what I needed to do to be the best version that of myself that I could be. And I feel a lot of young athletes now just think that um, because they have the talent, because they're better than their peers within Trinidad and Tobago, that automatically translates to being the best everywhere. And it's not. Everybody on this planet is every football player on the planet is chasing that same dream, to play in the Premier League or to play for Manchester United as Dwight did, Dwight York did, and win the Champions League. Every single football player on the planet is chasing that exact dream. And if you are not prepared to wake up 15 minutes earlier, to do 15 minutes more on the training ground, or wake up half an hour earlier to do an extra half hour on the treadmill, you'll fall by the wayside. And I think that for me, kind of is the only thing that limits us. So while I praise the my own kind of path and my own understanding of my talents growing up, you can't let that. It can also be, it can also be a little bit of a trap. It can also be a bit of a double-edged sword, as I described it.
Yes. How are you seeing tech specifically? And I'll get to exactly a little later why I brought you onto the show as for tech pioneers, because I think we live in a new generation. It's very
Yeah.
different. Back in your day, this notion of getting discovered, I think, is a lot
Hmm.
more possible now. In
Yeah.
addition to you building your brand as an athlete from day one, I think is quite an interesting sort of prospect. How are you seeing tech changing football and by more generally sort of the sports landscape,
Well,
given your global purview?
I think tech changes life, in every single aspect of what we do. But specifically, with football, absolutely no different. Tech and AI can be used around recruiting, around talent identification. Um, I feel there's also a path, or a need, maybe, around to 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 make a good team takes a whole lot more than just the 11 best players. You need to have players who have an understanding, who complement each other. And I feel tech and specifically AI, and again, I'm going to apologize to you, Mark, and to your
That's
audience.
all good, man.
I'm not a tech guy, so if I'm throwing out the wrong names or whatever, please forgive me. But maybe AI can better identify how, if I have, who's the best player to play alongside um, Declan Rice. For some reason, comes to my name, comes to mind. Now, it may not be the most highly rated or highly sought after midfielder. It might be some guy who's playing at Birmingham City or something of the sort, and kind of understanding Declan Rice's strengths and what what he needs to complement that, um, might be something that tech can better identify. Um, from so that's a larger kind of perspective. From a more personal perspective, for players, it opens up, or for individual players, it opens up the world to see exactly what there is out there, what good players are doing, what's being asked of them. You can connect with coaches. You can highlight, showcase your own talents. there is so much that tech allows individuals to do because it makes the world small. For all intents and purposes, you've got the entire world in the palm of your hand or sitting on your desk. And how you use that, how you utilize that, can also determine your own path in terms of what that dream may be. So there's a lot that tech can do, as I say, from the broadest team perspective to the more individual needs.
There's something that you said that stuck out to me in terms of I may not be quote unquote the best statistics athlete, or by
Hmm.
stats, I may not be the best. But as you're saying, football is this game of uh, sportsmanship, it's a game of collaboration, it's a game of
Yeah.
trust. And I thought that was a very interesting point where the most suitable player is the one who can gel the best and
Hmm.
accelerate some of these folks who are, you know, sort of at the top.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how players should be navigating sort of uh, their career, especially football players? Okay, everybody wants to be the best, everybody want to
Yeah.
be, etc., etc. But folks that contribute to the team and grow the team like that contribute in a big way.
Of course. Of course. And listen, it's a team sport, and again, I liken so much in life to football specifically. It's a team sport. No player, Lionel Messi can't be successful. Cristiano Ronaldo can't be successful without the support of 10 others. Similarly in life, I do not believe in the phrase, a self-made man or woman. There's so much that goes into who we are and shaping who we are. And similarly with a football team, um, it makes no sense having while it may be fun, um, it makes no sense having a team comprised of Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe, Vinicius Jr., Erling Haaland, um, throwing 4 or 5 other strikers in there, because they are regarded as the best players in the world. You need somebody. You need somebody to defend. You need somebody to keep the ball out of the goal. You need somebody in midfield to be the link between those two. Um, that's that's football, and that's life. You know, we can't we can't all work in tech. You know,
Mhm.
um, somebody's got to play football. Somebody's got to talk about it. You know, similarly, we can't all talk about footballs. You can use that in so many in every aspect of our lives. And then the successful teams are the ones that kind of understand or are better able to address, chemistry and players complementing each other. And that has what has defined good and great coaches through the years. Coaches who can identify those talents and then get the team to play a certain way, given the strengths of those talents, or get the team to adjust given the strengths of the opposition. That's what has defined great coaches. Um, I feel that technology can play a part in addressing some of those decisions, and maybe giving additional insights into coaches who may not be Pep Guardiola or may not be Sir Alex Ferguson. I still think that even with tech, there's a human element to it. We as much as we talk about tech and AI learning and everything that kind of you see is steering the technology space today. It's supposed to better the life of humans, and humans are involved in it. So there will always be that human touch. There will always be um, that slight differentiation. You know, you and I can sit down behind a computer and work on with the same programs and have very different outcomes and experiences, because you and I have very different experiences in our own lives. And so I think that, again, technology kind of maybe closes the gap somewhat, but that gap will never be entirely closed, because I think humans are still an important factor, an important ingredient in our technology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have? So there's a large population of Caribbean diaspora that
Mm-hmm.
want to see people at home succeed. I guess you and I both
Yeah.
don't actually live at home. We go visit, and our families are at home to some degree. And I really feel it for the young people in the region, because I think we have such an old colonialish kind of vibe
Yeah.
mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and where the job market is not. I think before, when you were younger, there were opportunities for you to grow within a company.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that's the case today. Um, what would you say to a young person, maybe who's interested in sport and this notion of a dual career? I could do broadcasting, I could play football, I could be a YouTuber. What advice do you have for those folks to broaden their opportunity landscape from home?
And listen, I think that is something that all players can and should do. I'll use myself as an example. And while I went to college and university long before, technology is what it is today. Uh, I never thought of my career, of my life, as being one dimensional. As you mentioned, I graduated university before I went to turn pro. After I retired, I went back to university and did a master's degree. I just feel that, um, you know, kind of boxing yourself in limits opportunity in the short term, in both the short and the long term. Had I not gotten a university degree coming out of CIC as I did, I don't know if I'd be able to do the job that I'm doing right now. In kind of just the way I structure my points and my arguments and how I articulate myself. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. So while I point out that, um, I have a mechanical engineering degree. I've never worked a day in mechanical engineering in my life. I am still eternally grateful for that experience and what it has given me. And I think similarly, for all players, for all young players, if you're able to kind of broaden your horizons in that regard, in what you're doing, depending on to your points, whether you do a podcast, whether they're YouTube videos, do a coaching course, whatever it may be. I think all these things kind of open you up to new ways of thinking, um, to ways to apply yourself, and just a greater appreciation of whatever it is you're doing. I would always advise young players to do a coaching course, just so you understand the game from that side, and maybe if you do a coaching course, now that you're standing on the field, you can have a better appreciation of what each person is doing, your position, what you're supposed to do in different situations, what the coach might expect you to do. Do a referee's course. You may never referee a game, but you have a better understanding of what the referees see and how you can manage your time on the field, whatever it may be. So while these things may seem like a waste of time, um, I think it has a great knock-on effect in terms of in terms of broadening your horizons, and just more simply, it makes you it makes you kind of manage your time a little better, because one of the things as a footballer is you have a lot of time, you know, professionally and preseason out a part where you train 2 or 3 times a day, and certainly when you meet up with your national team, you train a couple of times a day. But for the most part, I would. I would arrive at the training ground around 9 o'clock in the morning. Training starts 10:30. We finish around 12:30. I would stay, I almost always stayed another hour or two afterwards. So let's call it an hour and a half. So all of a sudden it's 2 o'clock. I know I have absolutely nothing to do until 9 o'clock the next morning. And that gets a lot of players in trouble. That gets a lot of people in trouble. And if, again, just me managing my time and having to manage my time as a student athlete at university allowed me to kind of, you know, make better use of my downtime as a professional. And so just again, so as a young player, if you're going from training to, your referee's course or whatever, I have to train, I have to do this, this is my time, and then I have to get myself together, and I have to get to such and such a place to do my referee's course, and I'm have to do a little bit of homework for my referee's course. You just manage your time better. And again, I think in the longer term, those things prove invaluable.
You talked about players getting in trouble, and I think this is I don't know. I had some friends growing up, and Shaka, these guys were world class, world class. They went to university abroad. In my opinion, I think they could have made it to the pro level, and um, that downtime, I think, is where they missed especially the chasing, chasing the fun lifestyle. Can you give players some advice? Because to be a great player, you have to have an extreme level of confidence. That's my assumption.
Yeah.
And with that extreme level of confidence comes an extreme level of swag, almost, which to some degree can bring distraction into your life. How do you guide folks to manage that in their careers?
I think first, while you have confidence and you have swag and all of that attracts, I think one of the first things you have to do and you have to recognize is how many other players have just as much talent as you. Now, there are a few standout examples. Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kylian Mbappe, there's some players who would have made it no matter what, would have made it to a high level no matter what. For 99% of the rest, there really isn't an awful lot in between. And I make that point all the time. I don't think there's any difference between, and I'll use my former club, I'll use West Ham as an example, just because it's easy. There's no difference between a good West Ham player and an all right Manchester United player. The only difference is what that Manchester United player is prepared to do in his off time, what he's prepared to do extra. And when you recognize that, when you realize that, I think that is what makes all the difference. That you're part of the 99. And even so, even if you're part of the 1, look at how Ronaldo trains. Nobody can challenge that he is one of the most gifted players to have ever walked this planet. Nobody can challenge that he's also one of the hardest working players to have ever walked this planet. When you recognize how little difference there is between players at top clubs, players at middle and even bottom level clubs, and the big differentiator is how you manage that downtime, what you do with it. Good, bad, and indifferent. When you recognize that, I think that changes a lot of your perspective, and your justice as such. If you recognize that, and you still, party too much, well, that's on you. That's you've reached your ceiling. Now, that might, to your point, somebody that player might be perfectly happy, playing for team in the US, a mid-level team in the US, and going out after games every Saturday night, and maybe on a Tuesday and a Wednesday as well, they may be perfectly happy doing that. And if they are, fair play, that's all right. You do you. But you cannot tell me that your true dream is to play at the highest level, and the first thing you think about after a game or after training is, where are we going out later? Now don't get me wrong. Players have a good time. Players enjoy it. I use Dwight York as an example because I think Dwight is a perfect example of it. Now, Dwight certainly as a player garnered a reputation as a guy who liked fun, who would go out and enjoy himself, and a lot of times he did. I tell two stories about Dwight. One, I was at Reading. He was playing at Aston Villa, and or was I at Newcastle? Anyway, I was either at Newcastle or Reading. He was at Aston Villa, and I go down to visit Dwight. Now, Dwight and I mentioned that I first broke into the national team at 10 years old, playing a national under-12 team. Dwight was 8 years old and playing in that team. Russell Latapy was 10 years old. So I've known Dwight and Russell my entire life. And now here Dwight and I playing in the Premier League at the same time. So I go to visit Dwight. Go out for drinks, come home. I get up I get up early in the morning to go to the bathroom. I hear some noise in Dwight's room. But I know both come home by ourselves. So I go in Dwight's room. Dwight at 6 in the morning is doing 600 push-ups, 600 sit-ups. He played a game the day before. We went out the night. He come home. And I was like, what you doing? He's like, I do this every single day. I do this every single day. And he does this. I sit there and watch this man do this in amazement. And then he says to me, man, I'm feeling hungover from last night. I was like, you crazy? I just watch you do 600 push-ups and 600 sit-ups for no reason. And you telling me you hungover? That was my first kind of insight into Dwight. And then 1998, when Jamaica qualified for the World Cup, in preparation for the game, they put together a Caribbean All-Star 11 to play against Jamaica. The manager of that team was Richard Braffett, who was the manager of the Trinidad and Tobago national team as well. And I've known Braff for years. Great guy, I have to say. But anyway, Braff was managing the team. And how things work back then, you play the game. Once you play the game, everybody goes back to the hotel, and then they shower and then you come to see the manager, and he gives you, payment for the game, whatever it is. And Braff is telling the story that they play against the Jamaica 98 team. The Caribbean All-Star team wins 2-1. Dwight scores both. After the game, everybody comes, gets their money, and everybody's off. Till Braff is sitting there. One player hasn't shown up for their payment, Dwight. So he's sitting, he's waiting, he's wondering where Dwight is. So he goes to Dwight's room. The door's open. So he just knocks and walks in. Dwight is again doing 600 push-ups, 600 sit-ups. Now, mind you, this has to be 2 hours after he just played 90 minutes and scored 2 goals. Dwight does his 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups. Manager lets him sign, he gets his money, Dwight is down in the bar. All everybody would talk about is Dwight scored 2 and then hit the bar. Nobody saw what Dwight was doing behind, and I witnessed this with my own 2 eyes. So I use that story as, people see one side of being a professional footballer when there's so much that goes on behind closed doors, away from the tabloid headlines. Now, again, you may want to just be the guy at the bar having drinks, swag, and all that kind of attracts, or you may want to play for Manchester United and win the Champions League. You can do both, but it takes a certain level of dedication that I'm not sure many people are capable of.
Those were amazing stories, and now you've made push-ups and sit-ups in the morning that much more meaningful. And thank you for sharing some of those insights, because not many people know what that level of success takes.
Mm,
I think Cristiano Ronaldo, you get to get a peek of it, and the big players, you get to see it, but
yeah.
seeing someone who's come from our training grounds to where they could be now, I think that's quite
Mm,
amazing. And so you and I went to the same high school. We're sort
hmm
of, I personally think I'm blessed to have sort of come and go to that school. What did that institution, I'm going to kind of walk through some of the institutions to try to understand how each of those places prepared you, or what did they arm you with for that next level? What would you say you learned in high school that prepared you for
mm.
your career?
That's an interesting one. And I say, um, and well, and I'll say this, in certainly into my career. Now, my coach at CIC was Hayden Martin, who I credit for keeping me in the game of football. And I say that because I'm going to, you know, prestige high school, in Trinidad and Tobago, and all that comes with it. And I'm playing football, and I was young. I was one of the younger. I was always one of the younger players in the national teams that I was playing. Um, so I'm a awkward teen. Um, I'm younger than all the other guys. I'm going to a prestigious school, and many ways I didn't feel like I fit in for any number of reasons for as long as I can remember coming through the national teams. I didn't doubt that I was good enough, but I just didn't feel like I was kind of a part of some of those teams. And I enjoyed my football most playing for CIC. And had it not been playing for CIC, one time I got dropped from the national team, and I felt like it was a blessing. Like that's what I wanted. Like, I didn't want to be in the team. But playing for CIC, and specifically Hayden Martin, I think was what kept me in the game. What kept me playing football. Now I have friends. Now, these are people who I understand and understand me. We spend our entire days together. So certainly in terms of my football, I have St. Mary's College and Hayden Martin um, to thank for keeping me in the game in the way that they did. And of course, that provided opportunities for me to go off to college. To pursue a degree, which is what everybody did back then. You kind of, there was no professional league in Trinidad. There was no professional league in the US. That's how long way I went to school. But what everybody did was, if you could play, you get a scholarship, and then you find a job. And that was kind of my intended path. That I was going to just get a job as a mechanical engineer somewhere. Because I like cars, but let me just add, I like cars, so I wanted to design cars. That was sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I don't think.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, I wanted to design cars. That was my dream job.
Hmm.
I thought that was my dream job. But yeah, so I went on to do mechanical engineering. So that for me was what I got most out of at CIC in terms of football, certainly.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing that you bring this up, because I was wondering why you did mechanical engineering. So now it
Mm,
makes more sense.
yeah. Oh yeah, I
And
love cars. To this, I still love cars.
hmm,
I want people. It's like if you see me driving in a fancy sports car at some point, I'm
you
not going
enjoy
through
that.
a midlife. Yeah, I'm not going through a midlife crisis. I'm going through an all my life crisis. This is what I've wanted to do my entire life. So forgive me that if you see that one day.
No, that's a blessing, man. Um, One thing I wanted to maybe call out, you highlighted your coach. So it seems as if in a player's career, these coaches are quite
Yeah,
critical.
Yes.
to your success. What advice do you have for players? And I think in general, folks, when they find mentors, how do they maximize that opportunity?
Yeah. I think, certainly in terms of coaches and relating to coaches and the impact that they can have. Um, well, on the one hand, I think a lot of that is to do with the coach and their personality in particular, and how you relate to that, how just how you connect and understanding between the two of you, and then just kind of be true to yourself in that regard, which is what CIC was able to do. I was able to be true to myself, to who I was, in many ways that I didn't feel like I could or was able to when I was playing with the national team, and wasn't able to associate, on different levels and different contexts with some of the other players. Oh, mind you, some of those players are still very good friends of mine to this day. We're still in regular communication. But just at the time where you're still trying to figure out life and, so much about it, we didn't connect as we have later on in our lives. And similarly, from a coach's perspective, um, you have to be mindful that you don't fully know people's stories. Then know, and not just, again, in so many, in some of the work that I do, I recognize the role that so many coaches play in terms of father figures. Now, I have a foundation in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, it's based but we go down to Trinidad and Tobago and work with the police service and their foundation arm, doing work in some of the more challenged communities in Trinidad and Tobago. And I recognize in those officers how many or to how many kids they're the father figure. They're a stable male presence in so many of those communities. Now that, I think that is kind of bigger picture and kind of hits you in between the eyes a little bit more easily, because you can see that and you can probably identify that a little bit easier. But on different contexts, you're never quite sure what kids are going through. Some of the challenges. I know I always had a father in my life. I always had a mother. Both my parents have always been a part of everything that I have done. But just not connecting as a kid, and I say kid because I'm a young teen, not connecting with some of my teammates as I did. Sitting in football, that was more an issue for me to kind of address on a football field through a coach. And without sitting my coach down to have that conversation. They just kind of, recognize that this is where I feel wanted. This is where I feel at home. So my advice to coaches is, at times, even when, kids have both parents at home, strong presence, when everything seems perfect on the outside, sometimes you just never know, and it's small things that make the world a difference. No, I'm not. Who knows how things would have gone had it not been for Hayden Martin or my CIC teammates. Um, but as we sit right now, as I look back, I am thankful for them being a part of my life at the time in my life that they were.
Absolutely. You went to Harvard, so
Yeah.
I've interviewed a gentleman named Nick Fuller. He's a VP at IBM,
Okay.
and the pedigree. What I've learned about folks at Howard is that, especially in the Caribbean community, the elders who had gone before you really set the tone, and they set the pace for how things are going to go.
Right.
So you went before him, so I think you had set the pace for him, and then he got his PhD at Columbia and all that. So he's done really well. And I got clued into this because I met someone in Trinidad who's a CEO of a very big corporation in Trinidad, and he went to Howard, and he highlighted, "Oh, I saw Nick," and etc. So these echelon of people in Howard, what would you say? How did Howard prepare you as an athlete and as an individual for sort of that next stage of your career?
I think how it prepared me for the wider world. All of a sudden, I'm again, a young black kid from a small corner of the planet in this big, broad world. A big, broad world that oftentimes isn't fair to people of our hue. And I think going to an HBCU specifically kind of prepared me for that. Again, you grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm part of a racial majority. I never feel constrained. I never feel like anything is foreign to me or unavailable to me. And then all of a sudden, I land in Washington D.C. and Howard University, and it is the polar opposite. And that kind of speaks to the wider world, and preparing for the wider world and its challenges. Very similar challenges that occur in the game of football, and how you navigate that, how you navigate that space. So again, I'm eternally grateful for that experience because it was at Howard that I grew up.
And the other thing that I found out was interesting is that you chose, well, now I understand why you chose a technical degree. And at least, so I was an international student as well, coming from Trinidad, and I was able to sort of secure residency and all that through a technical path. I always advise folks to, as much as possible, take a technical path. I don't see many athletes take that route. What advice, given your perspective now, as you see the global space of careers, how would you guide them?
I think you pursue a degree that you could work in. Find something that appeals to you, that speaks to you, and chase that for whatever reason. I think more and more now, you kind of recognizing the broad scope of what's on offer academically. Certainly when I was coming out of high school, I was just thinking, be a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, and it seemed far more narrow than it is today. But find something that speaks to you. Again, I told you why I chose mechanical engineering, because that spoke to me. That's what I wanted to do. But it could be so much else that leans into your passions. Whether it's finance or economics or whatever it may be. I think the one thing that, again, technology continues to show us is, while technology makes the world so much smaller, it shows us how broad the world is and how much there is out there. And so find your niche, find what speaks best to you.
Yeah. At which point in your athletic career did you know that you were gonna make it big? I know you said in the beginning you always knew you were really good, but I'm very curious to at which point in that arc you sort of knew.
Well,
this was it.
make it big is such not vague, but uncertainty.
Sure.
Because on the one hand, as a player, you're one bad injury away from it disappearing overnight. So that's always there. That is just a reality of the profession. Probably in terms of, so I probably at some point during my third year at Reading, I kind of felt like, yeah, this is gonna happen. So I graduated from Howard in 1992. I'm offered a trial at Reading, who at the time were a small, second division club, but then in today's money, that's League One. So they're a small League One club. I go there. I'm on trial for 2 months, and nobody says a thing to me. Nobody from the club says a thing to me. I have no idea if I'm doing well, if I'm doing poorly. There's just this uncertainty. They are paying me something like £100 a week just to get food and survive. The only thing that was I could take any encouragement from is that there were other trialists who came with me. They sent them home. Other trialists arrived after me. They sent them home, but I was still there. So I had absolutely nobody said anything to me. And then all of a sudden, I remember the date, September 8th, 1992. We're away to West Brom. Ozzy Ardelius is coaching West Brom. They're top of the table. And the manager calls in the starting lineup, and I'm in it. That's the first I know that they even considering me. Honestly, I cannot remember. We lost the game 3-0, I think it was. But from the moment he said my name to the end of the game was a total blur. Total blur. I had no idea. So anyway, then I sign a contract. As it happens again, fun fact, I actually signed my first pro contract 2 days later. I still have my first pro contract somewhere around, dated September 10th. So I wasn't supposed to play. You're not supposed to play a professional game without a pro contract. But the manager was like, don't tell anybody. But anyway, that was what, 32 years ago now, so I guess I'm safe to tell that story. I play, 10 or 12 games that season. Kind of up and down, up and down. And I hated it. When I say I hated it, it didn't go well. It didn't go anywhere near as well as I hoped, as I thought it would. Here I was, I'd left friends, family, loved ones back in the States, and I'm just in this small town, 45 miles outside of London. It's cold, it's dreary, I'm not playing well. And I came back home in the off season, so summer of '93. Go up to Toko. My dad is a senior magistrate, and he was serving Sandy Grande and Toko at the time. So you go and family is also from Toko, so we said we had a property up there. So we go and spend some time there. And I said to my dad, I was like, Dad, I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to go back. I just go back to Howard. I had offers to go on and do my master's. It's like I can't. This ain't for me. But I'd signed a 2-year contract back in September '92. And his advice to me was, listen, you honor your contract. You sign a 2-year contract, go back up, see the next year out. If things don't work, fine, you go back to school. All right. Dad said to do that. That's what I was going to do. So I went back up with the intention of just seeing out the year, and then I'd go back. I gave it a shot. I gave it my best shot. Walked back in preseason. Manager and assistant manager, Mark McGee and Colin Lee, called me into the office. And they say, I might be paraphrasing, but this is kind of the gist of exactly what they said. Listen, we sold the starting goalkeeper, a guy called Steve Francis, sold him to Huddersfield. We sold Steve to Huddersfield, and we don't have any money to bring anybody else in. So you're our number one. And that was it. I was the only goalkeeper on Reading's books for that entire year, and I played every game. And still had the kind of roller coaster, but things leveled out. We got promotion from League One into the Championship. And then during that Championship season, again we started the season really well. And I was playing really well. And a lot of clubs started, there started to be a lot of speculation about my future, about, me moving on, number of things. And then actually Mark McGee left during that season to join Leicester win the Premier League, and wanted to take me with him. But we were doing so well in the Championship. I wasn't even, I said to him, if need be, I'll come at the end of the season, but no, I have to see out this season. And that was for the first time I felt like, yeah, I could go on and play at the highest level at that point. That when there was genuine speculation about clubs coming in to buy me, that I started to feel like, yeah, I could do this. I could make it.
And when you had that feeling, so I imagine you were a hard worker up until that entire time. When you sort of got that inflection point, did anything in your work ethic increase, or were you already at sort of max? You
No,
were pushing all cylinders.
it increases. It increases, and I think,
Okay.
I say this to my kids. You've got to be prepared to work a little bit harder than the next guy to be a little bit better than the next guy. So if I'm going from Reading and then I go from Reading to Newcastle, and all of a sudden I'm playing alongside the likes of, Peter Beardsley and Les Ferdinand and David Ginola, and you see what these guys do in the gym, you have to match it. You have to match it. One of my favorite stories that I tell, if you allow me. So after I retired, I joined ESPN. There was a guy here, a guy who was working for ESPN at the time, by the name of Dave Roberts. Dave is from Middlesbrough, which is right next door to Newcastle, and he covered the entire northeast of England for one of the papers. And he told me that one time he wanted to do an interview with me for whoever he was writing for. So he called the club to schedule the interview, and the receptionist at the club said to him, um, "So, and how if somebody wanted to do an interview with one of the players, we typically finished around 12:30. So the media would arrive around 12 and try to catch those players, as soon as they could after training, because once the players get in the car and gone, you're not seeing them, so they have to catch the players before." So Dave says, he calls the club and says, "Listen, I'm doing a piece on Shaka Hislop. I want to come down and interview him." And the receptionist says, "Don't come early." And he was like, "What you mean?" He's like, "Well, after training, Shaka has a routine. He will go to the gym, or he will do extra the goalkeeper coach. He will go to the gym. He will shower. He'll have something to eat, and then he'll come out." He's like, "Shaka will sit with you for as long as you want. He will sit with you for as long as you want. But don't come at 12 o'clock because you're going to be waiting for a couple hours." And I felt, just hearing that story, it made me smile, because that was my routine every single day. Every single, maybe only Fridays I toned it down if you had a game on Saturday. Maybe only on Fridays I would work with the goalie coach, but I wouldn't go to the gym. But every other day I would do extra the goalie coach, and then do an hour or something wherever it was in the gym. And it I feel that kind of spoke to, just hearing that story, kind of, and oddly, and I think one of the things that kind of makes me smile most about that is, this is the club receptionist, telephone receptionist. This is not coach telling the media guy this. This is the club receptionist, because so clearly people recognize, and I always feel good. I always feel good about that. I love telling that story. It's my little pat on the back.
Of course. I think those are the stories that encourage us to do the hidden work.
Mm.
I would say. What were some things that you did to stay mentally strong? But I don't think many people share their insights about the mental aspect of not
Mm.
necessarily the game, but the mental aspect of performing at that level for a long period of time.
That's the toughest part to it. And in that regard, I say, I had, for want of a better word, an epiphany, um, about just kind of that mental toughness, of being able to separate my professional life from putting things in perspective. Um, my wife and I got married in 1995, right before I joined Newcastle. And, our eldest daughter was born a year later. And when she was still a few months old, she fell sick. No, it wasn't bad. She had gastro, but she couldn't keep anything down. And she had to be hospitalized for a few days. And I was going through these ups and downs at the time. I was really kind of struggling with my game. Um, and then all of a sudden, my eldest daughter had to be in hospital. And my wife was staying with her in the hospital room. I would go to training, shower, come to the hospital. Wife would then go home, and she would, shower and freshen up, and come back. And that put so much of my life into perspective. all of a sudden, having a bad game or letting a soft goal or making a mistake didn't matter. That wasn't as important as it was 24 hours before, a week before my daughter fell ill. And I'm a father at this point to 6 months, so at least 6 months. So you would think, yeah, family put these things in perspective. But when a family member is sick, all of a sudden, what's important kind of jumps out at you. And that was a turning point for me in my career. That absolutely was a turning point. I put so much things in perspective. And then I also tell people, and having kids as well, also kind of helps you put so much in perspective. Kids just see you as dad. I say this all the time. I could come home from a game and, my daughter's like, "How'd the game go today, Dad?" "Oh, we won 5-0. "Oh, great. Come on, let's have a tea party." Simple as that. "How'd the game go today, Dad?" "Oh, we lost 5-0. "Oh, never mind, Dad. Come and have some tea." They are just, they take, the old saying about taking, success and failure on an even keel, which is so true for sport. But kids have a way of forcing you to that just feels so right.
Very valuable insight. Aye. So now I'm going to reveal the reason why I really asked you to be on the podcast. So I consider you a tech pioneer because one, you've successfully transitioned from a fantastic professional athletic career into a global broadcasting career. And now you're building a global brand. So there's a gentleman called Naval Ravikant. He's a big Silicon Valley investor. And he talks about permissionless forms of leverage. And this is very important for people in the Caribbean because oftentimes we think we're gated by someone else in order to where opportunities are going to come from. So he cites two forms of permissionless leverage: code and media. I don't need someone's permission to code something and put a piece of software out there. The best example is Bitcoin. Someone wrote it or a group of people wrote it. It's changed the world. And media, I can put media out there and grow a global brand. I need no one's permission. So that's the real reason I'm looking at you as an ESPN. You're globally on the scale. I see how people talk about you and they talk about your opinions. Tell us about this new career that you have and how you are applying all those athletic lessons to this career.
Well, certainly in terms of athletic lessons, I just kind of use my own experiences as a player. What I've seen in the dressing room. How what mistakes you've made, how you've adjusted when things go well, how you how that sits with you. Those are things that I think most players all players experience. Most players can speak to. As I said, I also have to be able to articulate these things in a way that makes sense, and all the different technicalities of working in media. But I think most importantly, I try to be true to who I am. I am, as I keep saying, a young black kid from a faraway corner of the planet. That doesn't make my experiences, or that doesn't make football any less important or valid or viable for me. We again and again, I think this is part of our colonial mindset that not just we, so many people around the world haven't been able to shake. Is this perspective that the only opinions, the only perspective that matters is a European perspective. And listen, I get it. That's where the money is. That's where the big leagues are. That's where all the best players go to. But that doesn't mean that some kid in Petit Valley or some kid in Rio de Janeiro, or you pick a country, you pick a pick anywhere. that doesn't mean that their experiences around the game need to be Europeanized. That doesn't mean that their perspective has to somehow, kind of fold to be that. I understand, I understand the challenges of trying to become a professional in Trinidad and Tobago, where the pitches aren't great, or you can't get facilities, or it's hot, or whatever it is. And I try to represent that. I'm not European. I can't speak to what it's like to grow up and come through an academy. So I don't try to. But I try to be true to all my experiences, because I truly believe that those perspectives, our perspectives, are every bit as important and every bit as needed to be heard and shared.
So I'm doing this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a data scientist by day. I didn't necessarily realize that um, I maybe had some affinity to doing this. I just love
Right.
learning from people such as yourself. What advice do you have for people who want to maybe create a future career in media, or just be very proficient in that industry?
Do it. I mean, that's about the only advice I can give. There is nothing better for your learning than that first-hand experience. That a lot of times, and people always say to me, I get this question so often. How do I get to ESPN? And the trouble is, Mark, I have to answer this question honestly, and I'll tell you, as I tell everybody, I don't have a clue. I really don't know. I did not plan to go into media. I was, after I retired from FC Dallas, my wife and I were getting ready to move back to Trinidad. I had started interviewing for jobs in Trinidad. My wife is also from Trinidad. I don't know if I mentioned that before. But I retired, how oddly the MLS season runs. I retired, I think it would have been September. The season, the regular season runs up until the end of September, early October, and then there's the playoffs. But I, had been struggling with some injuries, and so switching to the club. I was going to retire at the end of the season anyway, so I thought let's just, get ahead of this. So I retired in September, and our plan was to move back to Trinidad, let the kids see out the school term up to Christmas, and then we, probably have Christmas. As I said, I was just outside Dallas, and then move home early in the new year. And then all of a sudden, the FC Dallas media officer, a guy by the name of Herman Sfera, calls and says, "Hey, an ESPN producer is trying to get your number. You mind if I pass it on?" I'm like, "Yeah, no problem." They call, they ask if I'd be willing to come up and do a couple of shows. I had nothing to do. As I say, we were waiting till the new year to move home. I was like, all right, no problem. So I do a couple of shows, no problem. Go back down to Dallas. Again, just kind of biding our time. And then I get a call 2 or 3 weeks later saying, so we're really impressed. We'd like to offer you a full-time, make you a full-time offer. So that call came probably sometime in October, and I didn't start at ESPN until my official start date was January 1st, 2008. And that was it. So I did no media training. It wasn't something I was planning on doing. So now somebody comes to me and asks, how do I get into ESPN? I don't know. I don't know. I can't offer any advice, it worked out for me. But I'll make this point that everything is learned. I would like to think I've gotten better at doing what I do over time. Whether it's hitting a hard time to be out, because sometimes you have to hit exactly on a second, so you need to be able to string your thoughts out or cut them short at exactly and have them ending. A lot of things, and just my delivery, how I speak to the camera, or whatever it may be. I'd like to think I've kind of learned as I've gone along. Now, so in talking to people now about getting involved in sports media, I'd say start a podcast or write an article on your local team. The only person watching your podcast might be your mother. That's fine. You will start to figure out hitting those hard times. You will start to figure out what works, what doesn't, what topics work. What do I talk about first? What do I talk about last? All those things, you start to get a better feel. You start to get a better feel for it. Eventually, there'll be two people might listen, because, for whatever reason. And you grow. And I think there are examples of that. And oftentimes we see the end product and we think, well, I could never be there. But the only way you could be there is to start. I guess the biggest social media stars is Cabby. And I always see these things on social media about, in his first year he had 12 followers or whatever it is, and his second year he was up to 100, and his third year it was 1,000, and then all of a sudden, so now all of a sudden you sit back and you look and he's got 2 million or whatever it is. I couldn't tell you, right? He's got 2 million followers, and you as someone starting off see that and are intimidated by the 2 million as opposed to being encouraged by the 10 in the first year. As I say, I get that question all the time, and I just say, start recording, start writing, find a local team, write about your local team. Not enough people are writing about women's football. Go and write about your local women's team and what they're doing, and do personality pieces on those players. And, just get in the habit of producing content. The more you do it, the better you will get. That's when, because, my example aside, ESPN comes calling when you are better at what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for personally giving me some motivation, because I think I've been doing this almost 3 years now, and I've gone through those ebbs and flows, and just like you're saying, I decided to start, and I've kind of switched my metric from how many followers I have to how did you feel in this
Yeah,
interview, and did I capture, did we have a good time, and did I serve you as a host to the best of my capability,
correct.
and just being good with that, and that's my measure of success as I tend to move on now.
That's an important shift. That's a very important shift. I think I'm going to say we, because not me. It's certainly the younger generation. Everything is about how many followers you have, how many likes did you get? And that is such a artificial and fabricated way of just looking at anything. Why does my success or my enjoyment hinge on other people, their perspective? I don't get that. I don't get that. If I'm happy, if I'm satisfied, if I feel fulfilled, and I get one like, I'm good with that. I really don't understand some of the other thinking. But then again, I'm an old guy now, and seeing this through an old guy's lens.
You don't have that clout yet. So to respect your time, so I have a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
What 3 books do you recommend folks read? I don't know if you read
Oh, good.
a ton of books.
Yeah. Let me see. What I'll tell you the 3 books. I'll tell you 3 books. I could give you 2. I would always
Okay, sure.
recommend.
Sure. I'll give you one.
So
So,
one of my passions is the business of football. I absolutely love it. Read David Yallop, How They Stole the Game. I read that. I love everything about the business of football. I really do, and I thought that was as good a book as you could read. I also read A Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela's biography, which again, it's a long book, it's a tough read, but it's one I'd strongly recommend to anyone, to Black men in particular. I strongly recommend. And then I do some reading. I'm kind of looking at my bookshelf to see what's up there. We Were 8 Years in Power by Ta-Nehisi Coates was also a very good book. That is more U.S. centric, and it speaks about the Obama years in the White House. And I thought that I found that interesting because it really puts so much about race and about the efforts of the Black community to find equality in the U.S. into such perspective, because it gives a good historical perspective to a lot of the issues, um, culminating with a Black president and some of the challenges that he had, and maybe some of the ways that Ta-Nehisi felt he could have better served the Black community. That was a really interesting read. So 3 very different books, for very different reasons. That probably the ones that jump out most at me right now. So
Fantastic. What's one piece of advice, could be life advice, whatever the case may be, do you have for a high schooler, someone in college, and a professional?
For a high schooler, think really broadly. It's a huge world out there. Think about your passions and think about where you feel you can make an impact in those passions. You're not constrained. Do not be constrained. Do not feel funneled into doing one thing or the next. And have that sense of belief. For a university student, I think that's when your focus needs to start to narrow as to where do you make your impact? How can what you're doing at college, university, depending on where you are, how can you now better start to identify your niche, your calling, and have that impact, and what that impact looks like, and start to work towards that, because again, your impact may be in social work or philanthropy, or you may just want to go out and make money that and allows you to maybe fund some of those things. That for whatever reason, but now you start to focus. And what was the third step?
The professional.
As a professional, regardless of your field, you have to focus on being irreplaceable, on being the best that you absolutely could be. I think that has to be your focus at this point. How can you be of greatest value to your company, whoever you're working for? Now, you may have ambitions to go on and be an entrepreneur, to work for yourself. I think the better you prove yourself irreplaceable to someone else, the better prepared you will be when you step out that door. And step out the door on your and it also empowers you to step out the door on your terms.
Yes, makes sense. So I have a rapid round of 3 questions. Right. So the first one, you're stuck on an island. You're gonna be there for the next 10 years. You could only have 2 meals. That they have a world-class chef. They will cook whatever 2 meals you want. They go fly in ingredients. What 2 meals would you eat for the next 10 years?
Easy. Fish broth and a crab and callaloo. And a crab, yeah. Easy. Ooh. Easy.
That's a good one. What's one thing that brings you joy?
Music. Family.
Ooh.
I without question, friends and family. I could have friends and family without music.
Good to know. And the last one is not necessarily about being famous, although you are famous. It's more about sort of that long-term end goal. What do you want people to remember about you?
If I could write my own obituary or epitaph, I'd like people to say that I gave it a go. That, whatever it is I was doing, wherever, that I gave it my best shot. I'm not asking for any more than that.
Fantastic.
I don't necessarily want to be, I don't want to be remembered. People talk about how do you want to be remembered? I couldn't care less if people forgot me. But I just want, especially people close to me, to be able to say, yeah, Shaka gave it his best.
Give it a good go. Well, Shaka, I want to say that I thank you for coming on the show. I thank you for gracing me with, giving me this opportunity to interview someone at the top of the field, and I've appreciated the conversation.
Thank you. I always enjoy an opportunity to walk down memory lane. It's always good fun.
Fantastic. Well, you have a great day.
I will.
Later.
Take care, man.